It is time for the royal appointment. There has never been a better time to restart the royal appointment than right now. I'm not going to say that I influenced this week's royal appointment, but I do wonder if our conversations were top of mind as she wrote this, given our back and forth last night into this morning. The subject line for this week reads, "The problem with Meghan's amateur online sleuths." And the subject line is an example of what Camilla Tominey tends to do when she feels attacked. This is a tactic I've seen Camilla Tominey use before, where she will use the tactics that she is accusing others of doing to her onto other people. And I'm not saying that she is directing this at me, but I will say that I went to school for journalism and was a nationally ranked speech and debater. I know how to poke holes in arguments. I understand when there is a lack of evidence, and I am going to call it out in a respectful manner. But again, it's telling what she focuses on in this piece. She discussed two of the articles that she wrote this weekend. Here's one of them, and here's another. I posted a video to my Instagram about those pieces and pulled in words from people like Afua Hirsch to talk about what perhaps people like Camilla Tominey are missing in this conversation. And yes, somebody tagged her in my comments and among other things called her a basist, so she replied. But she doesn't focus on any of the serious critiques that have come her way. Instead, she focuses on an unsolicited message from an Instagrammer named Marie. Probably not their name. And she says it sums up the average follower-less Sussex Squad obsessive. Quote, and she goes into all the nasty things that this person has called her. And I don't agree with attacks on the children or on someone's looks, which is something I have never resorted to when talking about Camilla Tominey's writing. I have always focused on what she says and what she writes. And this is where I think she might be talking about me. Quote, while I accept that there is a difference between those amateur sleuths reporting on what journalists like me have written and the trolls who follow them, it would help if the former didn't spout such utter ill-informed hat stand. Baby, that is not what I do. She doesn't focus on what myself or anyone else has said. She focuses on people who follow and see our videos that we do not have control over. She then goes on to the fact that none of these TikTok-style know-it-alls have ever spoken to anyone remotely close to these events. They don't appear to have done much wider reading besides Scobie's book and Harry's book, Spare. But she knows that isn't true because I reached out to her about this article and where the specific research came from, specifically stating that I had reached out to the HJS and combed through some of their papers to find out more. This may be a new concept, but that's just called good journalism. Fact-checking, cross-checking your sources. This is basic journalism 101, which I have taken. Then she goes into the basism stuff and she does what a lot of these writers do and try to use Harry's words against him. To which I always say, Harry is relatively new to his anti-basism journey. It's telling to focus on the words of a white male prince and not other specifically Black women who have been talking about this issue and the basism that undergirds the coverage in the British media. She calls out the fact that journalists like her are called basis for scrutinizing Meghan's version of events and pointing out facts in the story. She brings up the bullying claims before the Oprah interview. But the problem is this started from the very beginning. This started with the Straight Outta Compton articles, and it continued from there. You cannot ignore the role that basism plays in the reporting. And calling it out does not make you a stan of someone. This is what she does when she feels attacked. She deflects and she demeans. The reason she reached out to me in the first place is because I actually had a question relating again to the reporting for that Grenfell piece. And there will be a future video into that. In her messages to me, she calls out how offensive it is to be labeled a basist. And she says, let's have a conversation about unconscious bias. It exists everywhere. But to hurl slurs at complete strangers simply for doing their job? Here's the thing though, I wasn't. And yet, she refuses to engage with people that are actually trying to have this serious conversation and instead insults us by calling us Meghan's amateur sleuths. And again, she calls for if anyone can actually point to any time that she has written something that was basist towards a person of color. They've been saying it. It's been brought up a lot, but it's very telling that you have chosen not to listen to them, especially women of color. Or when things are explained, such as I did in my video, the focus is instead of how other people react to that. That is to avoid meaningful conversation. Because if you can't see that basism is not an individual moral failing, but a structural problem that we all participate in or work to dismantle, it's a non-starter. So yeah, that was a doozy.